In 1969, I was 9 years old and lived about 1/2 a mile down the road from an old church and cemetery. There were 2 other old houses there no one lived in. There were strange things happening quite often around where we lived back then. I remember one of the strange things that happened very well. My dad worked evenings from 3 p.m. until 11 p.m., just 3 miles down the road from our house. My mom, sister, and I had just gone to bed when we started to hear a bumping sound on the back of the house. My sister and I ran from the bedroom we shared in the back of the house to the front of the house where Mom and Dad's bedroom was. My sister and I were scared, so Mom let us sleep with her until Dad came home at 11 that night. Their bedroom had 2 windows, side by side on the front of the house above the porch. You could see through the curtains at night due to the street light out front. We were lying there after not hearing any more noise when, all of a sudden, we heard something on the front porch. Mom saw it first and sat up in bed. That made my sister and I notice her staring out the window. When we turned our gaze from Mom to the window, we saw what looked like a very large dog on the front porch. It was walking to the front door upright, on its back legs. When it reached the front door, it shook it violently. It was as tall as the door, and we could see it scratching at the screen door with its front paws. It remained there for what seemed like 15 minutes, but it was probably only a minute or 2. Mom didn't say a word for the first minute or 2. She just shushed us until it turned and walked about 10 feet to the steps on its back legs. Just before it reached the steps and went down them, it went down on all 4 legs. Mom told us to go back to sleep, and we eventually did. I don't remember her telling my dad, but I do remember this well. It was 6 to 6.5 feet tall while standing upright on its back legs. You could see all of its facial features, its ears, snout, and its head. Those features made it resemble a German shepherd. We hadn't seen anything that looked or acted like that thing in the area before that night. A lot of strange things happened there. I can't say it was a dogman, but it did walk on its back legs for several feet. Another time, when I was young, my sister, who I shared the back bedroom with at the time, was at our grandma's house, spending the night. I had gone to bed, but wasn't asleep yet. Mom had my bedroom window open so air could get in. It was hot that night. The back of our house was high off the ground. Consequently, the bottom of my bedroom window was 8 feet off the ground. I had been lying there, on my back, when I rolled over onto my stomach toward the window. My foot went off the bed on the window side and wound up being only a few inches from the window. All of a sudden, something touched my foot. I don't remember if it grabbed my foot or what, but the screen ripped, the curtain fell, and I scrambled off the bed and out of my bedroom into the living room where Mom was. She had heard the commotion and saw that I was frightened. She asked me what was wrong, so I told her what had happened. She went into my bedroom and saw the hole in the screen and that the curtain was down. She also saw how it was hanging halfway out the window. She didn't know what to think, so she called Dad home from work. He came home to check it out and walked around the house before coming in. He said he hadn't seen anything. At first, he didn't believe Mom. It wasn't until he saw that the curtain was hanging out the window that he believed her. He couldn't figure it out. We didn't have any problems with prowlers. At first, they thought I had stuck my foot through the screen. I don't think that's what happened, because I wasn't sleeping yet. I just couldn't have done that.
2007 and 2010, my husband was on his way to work around 4 a.m. on a rural road, while rounding an S-bend when his headlights hit a large, dark brown figure that was sitting about 30 feet off the road, watching the road. He described the figure as about 4 foot tall, sitting with legs bent out in front of it. Wolf-like face, large pointed ears, does not remember eye shine, leaning back on human-like arms. My husband immediately felt endangered and floored his vehicle's accelerator. This man has no fear of humans. I've known him for 30 years and have never seen him afraid of a natural being. He's hunted and fished since childhood. It took him a couple of years before he told me about this sighting. He said his first thought was that thing can catch this car, rip me out and eat me if it wants to. He was paranoid and had his head on a swivel all that day. Still, to this day, he cannot drive past that location without feeling some kind of way. The second sighting occurred in 2010 and happened to a coworker. I noticed she was acting strangely whenever we talked about spooky things, so I asked her what was up. She said, "Okay. Don't think I'm crazy." Then she went on to tell me how one night, she was driving home from a late second shift, between midnight 1 a.m. about 5 or so miles from where the first sighting occurred. She had to slow down to a near stop, to turn onto a road that would take her home. That's when she began to hear what sounded like running alongside her car. That's when she glanced out her driver's window and saw the most horrible face. Her first thought was werewolf. She described it as being black and gray in color, with large teeth. She said she didn't look again, but could hear it running next to her car until she reached 45 to 50 miles per hour. That's no joke on a back road. She was scared out of her wits. After arriving home, she ran to the door, dropped the keys, went inside, closed all the curtains, and did not sleep a wink that night. We're both nurses, and I've known her for about 7 years. She grew up in NYC and is not a storyteller. Neither of these people likes to talk about their sightings. You can see a change in them when their encounters are brought up. I don't need to see one to believe them. I know they exist.
On July 4, 2016, just a few days ago now, 2 friends and myself decided to raft down the Chattahoochee River and spend time at the Diving Rock and laugh at all the drunks enjoying their holiday. This is a North Georgia summer tradition going way back to the 60s. I am 47 now, but in my youth I did it quite a few times and damn near killed myself doing a gainer off the diving rock when I landed on my belly, inhaled water somehow and nearly drowned. I was fairly drunk and don't remember how I made it back to the surface, but my upper body was purple the next day and my internal organs hurt for weeks. The river was way down that year, maybe 1988, so that made the big flat rock at least 25 feet high off the river. Most people chickened out once they got up there. Anyhow, so this past Monday after at least 28 years we were back, but sober now since I haven't drank alcohol in over 10 years. I had to answer the call of nature, number 2, so I had to walk very far back into the dense woods because of all the people, 15 or so, waiting to jump. Having nothing but my bathing suit, I walked much further so I could try and find something akin to toilet tissue. Finally, after I reached a small clearing surrounded by old-growth pines, I began my business. As I am squatting in a very vulnerable position, out walks in broad daylight an enormous canine-type creature. I spent 21 years in Army, all over the world and 3 different theaters of war, and I have never even heard of this creature before. In the 3 days since, I have barely slept at all, researching everything in a zombified state. I can still taste the fear in my throat and my own vomit. I am 6 foot tall and about 250 solid pounds, and this thing dwarfed me. At least 7 foot 6 and maybe 350 to 400 pounds. As a former college and semi-pro football player and powerlifter, I know about big people and about strength and musculature, and this was no normal creature that evolved somehow in that environment. This is some kind of genetically mixed entity of man, wolf and primate. My encounter with it lasted for minutes. It displayed very bizarre behavior and vocalized several times at me. It stunk so bad and horrified me so badly that I retched again and again. I was gone so long that the girls came looking for me, and they are what finally scared it off. When they found me, I was trembling and couldn't speak. As a combat lifesaver in the Army, I can tell you for certain that I was in shock from this. Every joint in my body and my muscles are still hurting after 3 days. I was gone so long that the girls came looking for me, and they are what finally scared it off. When they found me, I was trembling and couldn't speak. As a combat lifesaver in the Army, I can tell you for certain that I was in shock from this. Every joint in my body and my muscles are still hurting after 3 days. So, I will be more than willing to share everything with you in the hopes that I can relieve my anxiety somewhat by just expressing my trauma. Because, I'm not sure what type I saw, but I can promise you that this is not something that anyone would want to encounter twice.
Me and my other half Steve went to his friend's annual CB get-together at Grant County Park in Cryptid, Kentucky. That's around 45 minutes away from where we live. It was the 1st of October and the weather was nice, round the 70s. Plenty of space to explore considering that the park is 54 acres. Containing a playground area, one baseball diamond with lights and a basketball court. The picnic area has 5 shelter houses. There is a horse ring with a barn and stadium, and 2 multi-purpose buildings. I love nature and so much space appealed to me when dealing with people. I took a few joints with me to help with the pain and keep me calm. The get-together was from noon to whenever and a lot of people showed up. I bring cupcakes with us, which I feel like a dumbass to find out that Steve's friend was a diabetic and sugar was a no-no. So not a first good impression, oh well screw it. After grabbing something to eat I decided to go walk around, since Steve knew most there. Let's see, the picnic spot that we were at was up front. I decided to walk around, smoke and explore the other side. During my walk I was taking pictures here and there on my phone. I love taking pictures. I noticed that I was being pulled to the woods behind the baseball diamond. Goosebumps covered my whole arms instantly. Goosebumps covered my whole arms instantly. I knew I was being compelled to go to that spot. It was a very strong urge. I didn't feel anything evil or that. It was just extremely creepy to me that as strong as the pull was I knew something was there. So I took my phone out and stopped walking. I ended up close to this tree which caught my eye anyways, and I took a few pictures then started walking back to where everyone was. Even though I still felt the strong urge to go where I was being pulled. Later that night, when we were at home, I was looking at my pictures I took and doing some grayscale pictures with them because they look awesome that way. I noticed the one picture I did in grayscale, the tree, it had a spirit in it. You could see it so clearly. I showed it to Steve and he thought that was cool, then asked what was that by the bush. That's when I saw it, a pair of eyes staring at me in the area I was being pulled to. I got goosebumps immediately as soon as I saw that. I thought that what I had captured with my photo was a hellhound, but when I finally showed my pictures to my friend Teresa, who was into UFOs, Bigfoot and I knew she would be interested. When I told her where we went when I took my pictures, she told me it wasn't a hellhound but a dogman. I'm a believer and have a very open mind. I have seen and experienced a lot. So to say that this is so cool, it is. She didn't think so and said I was lucky it didn't follow me home.
February 9, 2017. Well, I am 24 years old, male and live in the middle of nowhere. Literally. I will be short and simple about my encounter. I was getting home late one day after dropping my sister off at the airport in Lamar, Colorado. I live just under 7 miles north of the Oklahoma border, on 250 acres of land. I have a trapline running around my property for coyotes. The first 2 traps I checked were empty, so I headed south. That's when I saw this thing. At first, I thought it was a coyote. A big coyote. It was almost 5 feet tall, on all fours. It was caught in my trap and was running around, making a dust cloud, and then it stopped and looked at me. Now, I use a Duke number 3 leg hold trap, so I can catch a variety of things in it. Anyways, I slammed on the brakes and my truck stalled, because it's a manual. I was fumbling for the keys to start it. It's an old farm truck, with a carburetor on it, and it had quite an after fire. Once it heard that, it lunged at me and roared. I saw that it had its hand, not paw but a hand, caught in my trap, right hand to be exact. It had probably been looking for the dead rabbit I had in the bait hole next to the trap. It then stood up and ripped the 2 earth anchors I had, 24 inches in the ground, right out. It took me a long time to put them in with a 10-pound hammer, but it pulled them straight out, within 15 seconds. After it did that, it just stood there, looking at me. It felt like an eternity, and I knew my .357 would do nothing to stop this thing if it came at me. I prayed to God that it wouldn't come for me, in my truck. I was looking at it in shock and awe and noticed that it had orange eyes. They weren't glowing. Instead, they had a tint, like a cat's eyes in the dark. They may have been reflecting my headlights. I can't be sure. It then took a step towards me, curled up its upper lip, showing me its teeth. They were huge. The longest two had to have been 4 to 5 inches long. It then growled at me, and then it was gone in the blink of an eye. I was scared crapless then. I jammed the truck into gear and spun the tires, getting out of Dodge. Like I said earlier, it seemed like an eternity, but it must have lasted no more than 30 seconds at the max. I later returned with an Indian friend of mine. He is part Arapaho. I grew up with him and trusted him. He told me some stories that were passed down through his grandparents' tribe and mentioned something about a loup-garou or French werewolf. He also told me how fur trappers, in the late 1700s to 1800s, were chased off the land in the Rockies from this thing. After some research online, I found your channel and here I am now. I really am glad you have made this channel for people who have encountered these things. I used to work till about 10 to 11 at night, but I sleep with the lights on now. It sounds silly for a 24-year-old to be doing that, but to be honest to God, I'm still frightened by this thing. I haven't bothered going out looking for my lost trap because I'll bet the thing has torn it apart by now.